And as we do every now and then, let's thank Pastor Justin. He does a great job. We just appreciate him. Amen. All right, let me give you some in the news. You ready for some in the news tonight? How many of you really like in the news? How many of you don't like the news, but you like knowing that you know what you know? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're doing it in the news. We're trying to inform you. Though you're seeing certain things, we're trying to inform you. I was talking to Shad when I did our study for Psalm just back there, and he was talking about his company is having shortages from chips. And no one in his company probably knew it. He knew it because of being in the news. And so basically, when we tell you these things, it's not being reported in the news. And so we want to give you an insight in what's going on. Let me give you just breaking news that are happening tonight, right now, today. This is just one-liners from today, then we'll go into depth. So there's a third rocket attack in the 3 days targets U.S. forces in Iraq. So Iraqi forces are going against Americans. You don't hear that in the news because obviously someone's trying to cover it up for some reason or another. They want us to know that all of our foreign affairs are in great shape. They're not. People aged over 50 in Britain to be offered the third COVID vaccine shot in the autumn. Egypt and Turkey to hold 2 days of talks to normalization push. And that to me is exciting prophetically because Egypt and Turkey are going to align themselves against Israel in the coming days. Iran sought nuclear weapons technology for weapons of mass destruction last year, a report finds. So keep up the regulations, Joe. I'm not sure you're going to, but Iran is going to do what they're going to do. Denmark removes J&J from vaccination program over clot fears. Civilian killed, 6 injured in Israeli airstrike in Syria. Police close Temple Mount to Jews indefinitely until further notice as tensions rise in the old city. And it's really rising in Israel. And again, you don't hear any of that. The latest news from Israel, U.S. Secretary of State meets with head of Israel's Mossad spy agency. You've got to ask yourself a question. Why? I'll tell you why. Because Israel is stepping up their efforts in Iran. They are using their spy network in Iran to thwart Iranian efforts. And America is not doing that. America is not backing them. So they're meeting with them to find out, I guess, how far they're going to go. They're going to go very far. Biden said to tell Mossad chief that U.S. is not close to return to Iran nuclear deal. Well, that's news to us because he's been talking about having that nuclear deal for a long time. And then Biden boosted the refugee cap at 62,500 for the current fiscal year. And by the way, 4 times more than the 15,000 figure under Trump administration. So he's allowing people all in. Now those refugees are not just, we're not talking about Mexico. We're talking about from all over the world. He's just been upping it and he wants to bring it to 125,000. U.S. trade deficit soars to record high. The deficit soared to a record high in March. The Florida Governor DeSantis signs into law ban on vaccine passports. I don't know what you think about DeSantis, but this guy is really ahead of the game, and he's doing a great job. U.S. children to receive COVID vaccines despite side effects from 12 years old and older. They're going to get the Pfizer vaccine. Microsoft founder Bill Gates and his wife divorced this week, which is kind of interesting. You'll hear a little bit more about him. I guess money can't buy everything. The FBI gun frenzy now in the 16th month as Biden seeks a ban. He's going to push that as hard as he possibly can. It's a liberal agenda. Digital Dollar Project to launch pilot programs to explore designs and uses of a U.S. central bank digital currency. I've been telling you for a long time, paper money and fiat money is on the way out. And this digital currency is going to take over America, and they're looking at it right now. Biden cancels remainder of Trump border wall project that are funded by the Pentagon. That's about as wise as cutting your nose off to spite your face. The border wall was working, and just because of pride, he's not going to go through with it. 76,000 California inmates are eligible for early release through good behavior credits. 63,000 of them are convicted of violent crimes. Some of them are going to get early release that are serving life sentences. Listen, you wouldn't pay me to live in California. Thank God we have some Christians that are there and holding that state up, but I'm telling you, California is a mess. In Nigeria, Islamist Fulani militants murdered 33 Christians in 1 week. In Nigeria's Benue state last month. The murders were among the latest in years of deadly attacks of Nigerian Christian communities by Fulani militants who want to eliminate Christianity and impose Islam all over the country. Uganda Muslims arrested for murdering Christian pastor this last week. Finnish lawmaker charged with hate speech for sharing biblical views on marriage and sexuality. Tunisia grants asylum to Algerian Christians, but persecution still continues. Nigerian troops rescue Christian schoolboy abducted by Fulani herdsmen. So this thing is really hot and heavy all over our world going against Christians. Christian man tortured by police in Pakistan and held in custody. China government shuts down Bible apps and WeChat Christian accounts. China detains over 100 Christian worshipers, including children. We'll talk about that in detail tonight. So let's go to a little bit more of detail of what we're talking about with New World Order and tell you what's happening right there. So Bill Gates and China and your DNA, the race to control the world's biodata. And again, when we're talking about Revelation, we're talking about an antichrist, a world leader controlling people. He needs to have data to do that, and we're marching right down that area. Watch this. Is there a connection between China, Bill Gates, YouTube, and DNA collection? Recent reports reveal that a Chinese company with connections to the Gates Foundation is involved in COVID-19 testing and poses a potential threat to American privacy, particularly the medical and health data of those who have been tested for COVID-19. CBS's 60 Minutes reports this. It's learned that Chinese company BGI Corporation, or Group, the largest biotech firm in the world, offered to build COVID labs in 6 states, U.S. states. Intelligent officials issued warnings not to share health data with GBI. The largest biotech firm in the world wasted no time in offering to build and run COVID testing labs in Washington. The Chinese company, the BGI Group, made the same offer to 5 other states, including New York and California, 60 Minutes told. Foreign powers can collect, store, and exploit biometric information from COVID tests, declared the notice. And basically what it's saying here, let me give you that picture, because I notice it's not up here. It's there somewhere. It's not on this one. You'll have to go without the picture. Foreign powers can collect, store, and exploit biometric information. The Chinese are trying to collect Americans' DNA to win a race to control the world's biodata. The Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and BMI go back nearly a decade. Gates Foundation and BGI are forming a collaboration on global health and agricultural development with the goal of achieving common objectives in health and agricultural development. What they're trying to do is control everything about everyone. Specifically, this collaboration deals with developments in human, plant, and animal genomics and the study of DNA. So, you know I've told you about this a long time ago, but so many people go do Ancestry.com and 23andMe. Those companies, you may not see it, but when you sign up for those companies, it's nice to find out your ancestors. But on the bottom lines, and most of them in very small print, is the fact that they have power to control your DNA. They can do anything they want with it. And what they're doing is they're selling to China. And so basically we have these conveniences for us to try to give us more information in our lives, but we don't realize what's happening with all that data. And China is building. You got to ask yourself a question. Why would China want DNA and your biometrics? Well, listen to this. What is not mentioned in the 60 Minutes piece or anywhere else is the fact that Anne Wojcicki, CEO of 23andMe, is the sister of Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. Additionally, Anne Wojcicki's husband was Sergey Brin, one of the founders of Google and president of Google's parent company, Alphabet Inc. Google also owns YouTube. I hope you're seeing with these connections. The reason these connections matter is because there are common threads between Google, the Gates Foundation, companies like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and the Chinese government. While Anne Wojcicki and 23andMe work on DNA mining, her sister at YouTube censors reports on such topics that are often labeled misinformation. Understanding the incredible conflicts of interest here is the utmost importance to where all of this could be going, and it's not going in a good spot. Let me give you a little bit more for the New World Order, and again, I'm sorry I don't have the pictures for it. They didn't load up, but I'm going to tell you this one. This is about children. Biden's American Families Plan, a springboard to more leftist indoctrination. If the government can't educate our children, why would we trust them to raise them? Joe Biden doesn't have a good answer for that, but it hasn't stopped him from introducing another 13-digit spending plan to let the state babysit your toddler. And let me tell you something, this is going to happen. People are going to jump all over it. It's free daycare. And so he's putting it in the bill, the trillions that he's trying to raise up again. He calls an American Family Plan, a free daycare system that would give radical leftists an even earlier grip on our children. After seeing what the government-run classrooms are passing off as education, moms and dads probably aren't eager to put their children in the state care any sooner, but they probably will, because moms and dads are going to have trouble living within their budgets when everything starts rising. So when you get free daycare, how many of you know it costs an awful lot? Daycare costs an awful lot. Free daycare, they're going to put their kids there. And let me tell you what they're going to be indoctrinated to. They're going to be brainwashed on history, on race, on gender, and on sexuality. It's the liberal left's paradise to have your kids at 2 and 3 years old be able to be taught free. You don't have to pay a thing. You can go work and make money. It's all about people making more money or getting more money from the government and convenience. What we don't see is the back end of that. And the back end of that is that they're not going to raise them better than you are. And basically, they're going to raise them worse than you do. And what the Biden administration and really all of the left wants to do is push moms to give everything they have to the workforce and then put off their children to these government-run daycare facilities. As usual for the left, this isn't about what Americans want or even what's in the best interest of our children. This is about furthering their twisted agenda at the earliest possible age. Biden is what he's proposing to do is actually going in the opposite direction of what you should want. More government-run schools and less choice for parents and their families. And let me tell you something, when those government-run schools are there, they're going to get government money. If they get government money, they're going to teach the government agenda. And so they'll stop the money if they don't. So this is really scary when you think about it. This is something that's really harmful for kids. And I'll be honest with you, Americans love giveaway stuff. And there's going to be a lot of moms and dads who are going to say, wow, we don't have to pay that $400 a week. We can get our kids babysat. And so it's really scary. It's something that is right from the mind of the enemy himself. Parents need to fight back and demand the freedom to make their own decisions and choices. At the end of the day, kids don't need the government's guidance. Somebody say amen to that. They need yours. And as a country, we should be doing everything we can to make that possible. Let me give you a little bit about the economy. I have a chart here which I can't show you, but I'll tell you about it. This one says, soaring food prices are just beginning and could lead to a social unrest. So how many of you have seen food prices rise? Yes. So I've been telling you this, and I don't know if anybody else is doing it. You don't hear it on the news. You don't hear anything about rising prices. Yet you're seeing it, and it's incremental. It's almost like the frog in hot water. You throw a frog in hot water, you've heard it. Frog will jump out. You throw them in warm water and start heating it up, and they'll stay there. Well, that's what's happening to Americans. Things are rising slowly. They're going up, and they're not coming down. That is a sign that we are headed for hyperinflation. I've been telling this over and over and over again. The stock market right now has reached its highest. It will definitely plummet. There's no question in my mind. Somebody says to me, well, you think the stocks are going to plummet? Of course they're going to. It's inflated. It's a bubble. And so as you see this inflation rising, you're going to start seeing everything cost more. And now the chip shortage is hitting businesses, as we talked about. iPhones, it'll hit almost everything. I think it was Ford. Was it Ford, Shad, that we were talking about that has the cars? Ford, how many? 1 million cars they cannot produce because they're missing chips. 1 million cars. And so we're going to see it happen everywhere. And that means the cars that are now being put out will start to elevate in their prices. So we are watching this happen. And again, I'm not saying this to scare us. I'm just telling you, we should be hearing this. Should we not? We should be hearing about this so we can prepare. We're not hearing a single thing. And basically, food prices are going to even go further. I have a Bloomberg Agriculture Spot Index. And this is from just 2020 to 2021. The index goes like this. I can't show you the chart. It's not up there. But the index goes like this for the years, just about like this. From 20 to 21, it goes like that. That's the price of food. And they're predicting it to go even higher. With prices already soaring, global inflation, global, is about to go into overdrive as the leading food price indicators, the Bloomberg Agri Spot Index, hit the highest level in 10 years. In a nutshell, this is a problem since food is a large component of the CPI baskets in Asia, and this inflationary impulse in the region that houses more than half the world's population, 4 billion, should result in higher wage costs in the factory base of the world. As CPI and PPI rise in Asia, it will feed through globally in the months ahead. The record surge extends far beyond your weekly shopping, by the way, as there's an extensive literature connecting higher food prices to periods of social unrest. So historians have looked at every time there's social unrest in any area, food prices go up. Now, that's one reason why. Like the French Revolution of 1789, food prices went through the roof. In 1917 overthrow of Tsarist Russia, food prices went through the roof. Given the consequence of today's surge in food prices, given the hardship that's already occurred thanks to the pandemic, a fresh wave of unrest will be no surprise on a historical basis. So they go hand in hand. When there's less food, there's more social unrest. When there's more social unrest, there's less food. They play into each other. So the whole world is getting, I'll give you an article from France today. They're in a civil war almost, and we're not too far behind. Food prices are outrageous now, but they're only going to go higher. NBC News articles say get ready for higher grocery bills for the rest of 2021. Surprisingly, the NBC News article was generally right on point. Not published a lot, but it was there. Thanks to a variety of factors, food prices have been rising aggressively, and it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. So why are they likely to rise? Well, Yahoo News recently reposted an article that listed 4 explanations. Number 1, plummeting food production. We told you about drought droughts. This is talking about famine. Go back to that chart. Talk about the end times. Talk about famine, plummeting food production. 2, transportation tumult. Our supply lines are being shut down. 3, more eating at home. Think of that. And 4, wilder weather. All of these factors are making it more expensive for food companies to operate. And as NBC News has noted, food companies are starting to pass along those costs to consumers. Over 7 million people across 6 East African countries are in the cusp of starvation. 7 million. Even during the best of years, we struggled to feed our entire planet. Now we're struggling tremendously. The good news is that there's still plenty of food in your supermarkets right now. And that means that you have a window of opportunity to get prepared now for what might be on the horizon. What's that saying? It's saying, you should probably stock up on some food. How many of you know that? That's not a prepper. It's just being wise, because you may not be able to get the staples that you're going to get, especially not at the prices that they are now. Let me give you a little bit more in the economy. How much national debt is too much? America may soon be at an all-time tipping point. Last week, President Biden pitched a new plan for Americans before a joint session of Congress. More spending. The just released $1.8 trillion plan, presented just weeks after Biden signed a $1.9 trillion in COVID relief spending into law, includes free community college now, as well as universal preschool for all 3- and 4-year-olds, as I told you. Mr. Biden could usher in a new era that fundamentally expands the size and role of the federal government, the New York Times reported. What does that mean? It means that you'll be dependent on the government. And that's what big government wants. That's what liberals want. They want you to be dependent on the government. What they want to do is take away your individual choices. You know, the American dream is pretty much gone. If kids today think that they're going to raise up and do what their mothers and fathers did and their grandfathers and grandmothers, they're not. They're going to be taxed to death, because you have to raise this money, and the taxes aren't going to do all these programs, and they're not going to be able to raise that much. And, you know, sometimes I feel like, you know, I know you listen, but sometimes I wonder if the America has their heads on. I wonder if they're understanding what's going on. This is not all okay. Here's a typical thing with Americans. Americans always react after the fact. Always after the fact. They never prepare. They think life's going to go on as usual. I had somebody ask me at the start of COVID, they said, when's it going to get back to normal? It's never going to go back to normal. It's not going to happen. You have reached a watershed point. And again, you may be thinking, well, this is pretty dire news. No, you're God's child. Somebody say amen. I trust, this is the best time to trust God. Come on. Even though it could be scary for people that are out there, I don't feel it's going to be scary for me. I really don't. I think God's going to take care of me. That doesn't mean that I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to hide my head in the sand, because this is happening. It's going to happen. How much debt is bearable? The announcement comes months after the Congressional Budget Office released a report projecting a $2.3 trillion deficit in 2021. You know who I blame? I don't just blame Biden. I blame those Republicans that are doing nothing also. It's not just the Democrats. The Republicans should be throwing up their arms. They've been against big government and big spending for decades. And now it looks like they're laying down and letting him do anything he wants. And it's wrong. It's definitely wrong. It's not having you in mind. It's not having me or my children in mind, or yours. As a result, $28.2 trillion national debt was going to swell even faster. It's a dangerous level. It talks about GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. How much product we can make and what it's worth. Now listen to this. So no one really knows the debt tipping point, but it's worth noting that the U.S. debt to GDP ratio, how much we owe and how much we can produce and make money from, essentially the country's debt compared to its annual economic output, was 129% at the end of 2020. In other words, the official U.S. debt was nearly a third larger than the entire U.S. economy. So our economy, everything that's on shelves, everything that we produced in this year is going to generate a certain bulk of money. That is your gross domestic product. Your debt should never exceed that. Because if it exceeds that, then you're a debtor nation, and you're not an exporter, you're an importer of things, and you owe everyone. Well, now it's actually 3 times larger than what we can produce. If this was your household, you'd be in trouble. This means that if you got paid $1,000 a week, you're spending $3,000 a week. And you're going to be in trouble. You can't keep doing that over and over and over again. And our government can't either. And again, maybe people don't understand the economics of it. I'm simplifying it, and I'm telling you, this is a bad, bad system. scenario. Today, the federal government debt to GDP ratio is higher than it's ever been since World War II. The market is hedging like rats on a sinking ship. Many are eyeing an exit. This is why the stock market's going up, sensing that the dollar's day may finally be coming to an end, and as its value is eroded by mass pumping. So what's happening right now is the market is going up because people think that the government's making money, and they are. They're making money, and they're infusing it into our economy. So businesses have more money. You have more money that's there, but sooner or later they're not going to be able to keep doing that. And what that'll happen is it's like an air bubble. It goes into the stock market, and stock market expands like a big balloon. But once that starts to hit, and it's going to hit, you can't be in debt forever. That stock market is going to totally crash. It's going to make 1929 look like it was just another ordinary day. A lot of what they describe, debt, massive spending, inflation, price controls, destroy countries. It sounds eerily familiar to modern ears. There's a man by the name of Ebeling. He wrote a book called The Age-Old Riddle, Why Did Rome Fall? The answers vary, by the way. Some blame barbarians, others immigration. Some claim Christianity divided the nation, while others point to disease or the weakening of the Roman legions. All these theories are interesting and they're worthy of examination, but there's no single better explanation than the one offered by the economist Ludwig von Mises, who concluded Rome's decay stemmed from its rejection of individualism and free markets. They became overbearing. The marvelous civilization of antiquity perished because it did not adjust its moral code and its legal system to the requirements of market economy. What does that mean? It means that the government got very big. They spent money lavishly. You can still go to Rome and go to the center of Rome, which I've been many times, and see the buildings they built. They're absolutely unbelievable, even in the ruins 2,000 years later. And so all of that took money, and that money was inflationary money. The Roman Empire crumbled to dust because it lacked the spirit of liberalism and free enterprise. It didn't let the market have a supply and demand. It kept infusing money and taxing its people. And so the American president and statesman John Adams once reportedly said that there are two ways nations are destroyed. One is by the sword, and the other is by debt. And that's where we're headed. Let me tell you about a nation almost in the spot of being destroyed. Again, nothing you hear in the news. French generals warn creeping Islamism will bring about civil war. Now, listen to this, and listen to this article, and see how many things parallel what's happening in America. A group of retired generals has warned in an open letter that France is sliding toward a civil war due to the government's failure to control mass migration and creeping Islamicism in the country. The letter, which is a broad public support according to the polls, also warns against cultural Marxism. Do we have cultural Marxism in America? Absolutely. Well, our culture is changing, and it's changing to a Marxist culture. Now, besides Islamicism, think about these things that it talks about. And runaway multiculturalism and the expansion of no-go zones in France. The warning comes amid a wave of jihadist attacks, including the beheading of a school teacher committed by young men, none of whom were previously known to French intelligence services. The letter also comes after widespread public indignation over French justice system comprised by political correctness, as evidenced by the refusal to prosecute an African immigrant from Mali who, while shouting Allah Akbar, Allah is great, killed an elderly Jewish woman by breaking into her home and pushing her off a balcony. They won't prosecute him. They brought him in and they let him out of jail. Does that sound familiar? The breakdown in security, the government's apparent inability or unwillingness to do anything about it, has catapulted the leader of the Conservative National Rally Party, Marine Le Pen, to first place ahead of French President Emmanuel Macron in polls before presidential elections scheduled for April 2022. The open letter, published by the French magazine Valeurs Écoutées, April 21st, and was signed by 20 retired generals, 100 senior officers, and more than 1,000 other members of the military. It read like this: Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the government, ladies and gentlemen members of parliament, the hour is grave. France is in peril. She's threatened by several mortal dangers. We, who even in retirement remain soldiers of France, cannot, under the present circumstances, remain indifferent to our fate of our beautiful country. Our tricolor flags are not just pieces of cloth. They symbolize the tradition of those who throughout the ages, whatever their skin color or religion, served France and gave their lives for her. On these flags, we find in golden letters the words, honor and fatherland. Today, our honor rests on denouncing the disintegration of our country. The disintegration, which through a certain type of anti-racism, is that hitting anything? Has a single goal: to create division, even hatred, between communities on our soil. Today, some speak of racialism, indigenism, and decolonial theories. But by using these terms, hateful and fanatic partisans are trying to spark a racial war. They despise our country, her traditions, come on, her culture, and by attempting to erase her past and her history. It's happening in France. They want to see her regulated to the dustbin of history. With this objective, they destroy statues and twist century-old words and phrases, all to overturn our past military and civilian glories. All this while masked individuals infiltrate the protests and ransack businesses and threaten these same police that are supposed to protect them. Yet the police only follow the directives, often contradictory, established by you, the political ruling class. In other words, you won't let the police be the police. They're not able to arrest somebody. If they arrest them, they throw them back out, they put them back on the streets. Perils are mounting. Violence is increasing it sounds like America, day by day. Who could have predicted 10 years ago that a teacher would one day be beheaded as he was leaving his school? We, servants of the nation, who have always been prepared to pay the ultimate price for our country, cannot be passive spectators of the fate of such actions. I want to read all of it for you. It's imperative that the leaders of our country, find the courage to require to eradicate these dangers. Do not forget that, like us, a large majority of our fellow citizens is exasperated by your cowardice and your guilty silence. If nothing is done, laxity will continue to spread inexorably throughout our society. Ultimately, there will be an explosion, and our comrades on active duty will be forced to intervene and carry out a perilous mission of protecting our civilization values and safeguarding the lives of our fellow citizens. They're talking about a mutiny. They're talking about an overthrow of their government. The letter sparked angry rebuke from the French government. Defense Minister Florence Parly vowed to punish any of the letter's signers who might still be serving in the military. But French former Justice Minister Rachida Dati, who was born into an immigrant Muslim family, said this: "What is written in this letter is a reality. When you have a country plagued by urban guerrilla warfare, when you have the very regular and very high terrorist threat, when you have more and more glaring and flagrant inequalities, when you have a part of our patriots who are breaking up from society, we cannot say that our country is doing well. Today, the police have become a target for terrorists, and I consider that the police are not supported enough, including by institutions and especially by the judiciary. I'm afraid that the police will crack one day, and if they crack, we will go well beyond the disintegration of society." The poll found 86% agree with the statement that in certain towns and districts, the laws of the Republic are not being applied. 84% agreed that in France, violence is growing day by day. 75% agreed that in France, there exists a form of anti-racism that exacerbates hate between communities. And 75% agreed that French society is disintegrating. The Macron, in response to the open letter by French generals, vowed to crack down on suspected jihadists. The Muslim population in France is currently estimated around 6 million, but nobody knows for sure. The authors of the report warned that France is on the brink of a major social explosion because of the failure to integrate Muslims into the French society. So what we're seeing is in France is we're seeing something just right down the road for America. How many see it? Listen, people are not going to stand for it forever. They're not going to stand for people going to jail for violent crimes and then being released. 73,000 of them, 75,000 in California alone. So we're watching some things happen that are pretty scary. Let me give you a little bit more for religion and tell you what's happening there. How many of you followed the NFL draft? Not a whole bunch of us. That's good. But let me tell you something about the NFL, which is really deteriorating itself. Christian character in the NFL draft. Most people, at least those paying attention, expected quarterback Trevor Lawrence to be the first player selected in this year's NFL draft. And he was. Frankly, his draft stock has been a foregone conclusion since his heralded arrival at Clemson in 2018. In fact, the only doubts that exist about Lawrence's potential in the NFL have nothing to do with the talent or his poise, but about his character. Some pundits worry Lawrence has too much character. In a recent interview with Sports Illustrated, Lawrence said, "There's more to life than playing football." As a very committed Christian who is very public about his faith and the way it shapes his life, I get chills. One of the things Lawrence considers more important than football is Jesus Christ. He also apparently has a thing for his family. Recently, Lawrence skipped an NFL pre-draft event to marry his high school sweetheart. This crazy behavior fed a narrative that Lawrence, like other Christian athletes, is probably too soft and lacks the kind of maniacal focus required to succeed in football. Given that there's never been a shortage of Christian players who possess deep faith and achieve great on-field success, the narrative is absolutely baseless. No one who was receiving end of a hit by Steelers great Troy Polamalu thought his faith made him somehow soft. He was a born-again Christian. Still, the presumption persists that the perspective, balance, and priorities shaped by sincere faith are somehow liabilities and obstacles to athletic success. These critiques in reality say nothing about Trevor Lawrence. They only expose how absurd discussions of character have become part of our culture. So what it's saying is, he's being targeted now, one of the best athletes, by the way, college has produced. He's being targeted because of his Christian faith. This is what's happening in America. All right, Christian politician charged with hate crime for defending biblical views. I won't read it all to you. A Christian politician in Finland, you know what she did? She was talking about she has to defend herself in court for social media posts, which she quoted Romans 1:24 and 27 to criticize the participation of the Finnish Lutheran Church, of which she's a member, in the LGBT pride movement. If you don't know what Romans 1:24 to 27 is, it's against homosexuality. So she quoted Romans, and now she's in trial. They've taken away her position, and she's on trial. So we're watching it. We're watching it go everywhere we possibly would see it. Christian political, this one's China plans to transform the Christian church into its own image. The Christian politician underlined the importance of citizens in democratic countries use the fundamental right to express their opinions. The more Christians keep silent on controversial themes, the narrower the space of freedom of speech gets. And what's happening is Christians in China have to, if they have a church, what they have to really do is they have to be able to use the Chinese Bible. They have to swear allegiance to Xi Jinping, and they have to not use the word Christ in their church. And they have cameras all over their church in order for them to worship. So the underground church is growing like crazy in China. China's underground church has over 100 million Christians. Over 100. By the way, think of that. Think of how revival happens. That's how we went from 1 million Christians just 10 years ago. 10 years ago, 1 million, to over 100 million Christians today in China. And this last one I want to give you goes right back to our study in Revelation last week. How many remember the study in Revelation last week? We studied about asteroids, remember? Listen to this article that came out today. NASA impact simulation shows danger of Bible's wormwood prophecy. A week-long exercise held by NASA this week has concluded that a catastrophic event with an asteroid will be unavoidable, even given 6 months to prepare. The hypothetical impact scenario, which took place during a planetary defense conference hosted by the United Nations, confirmed that there is no current technology on Earth that can stop an asteroid if we knew in advance it was projected to hit the Earth. If confronted with a scenario in real life, we would not be able to launch any spacecraft on such short notice with current capabilities, the participants said. The only response to such an event would be to evacuate the area before the asteroid hit. However, the impact zone of many typical asteroids would be so large that it would be almost impossible to evacuate. We live in a time when giant space rocks are whizzing past our planet with alarming, it sounds like this guy's teaching my study, alarming regularity. Sometimes we know in advance what they are coming, and sometimes we don't. Some of these asteroids have even come within a range that rivals orbits from some of our own satellites. I told you that last week. In 1998, a big Hollywood movie entitled Deep Impact imagined what would happen if a very large asteroid hit the Atlantic Ocean. In one of the most memorable scenes in the film, a massive tsunami that is hundreds of feet tall slams onto the east coast of the United States, causing immense death and destruction. But that's just a movie, right? Could something similarly happen in real life? Absolutely. A computer simulation of an asteroid impact tsunami developed by scientists at the University of California, Santa Cruz, showed waves as high as 400 feet sweeping out the Atlantic Ocean to the United States. Stephen Ward, a researcher at the Institute of Geophysics and Planetary Physics at USCSC, and Eric Asfog, an associate professor of Earth Sciences, reported their findings in the Geophysical Journal International. Of course, an asteroid could potentially hit anywhere on the planet, but in their research, Ward and Asfog specifically focused on the Atlantic Ocean. And what their computer simulation came up with was extremely disconcerting. And at the impact site in the Atlantic Ocean, about 360 miles from the East Coast, Dr. Ward explained that 60,000 megaton blast of the impact would vaporize the asteroid and blow a cavity in the ocean 11 miles across and all the way down to the seafloor, which is 3 miles deep at that point. Such an impact would send a series of giant waves in all directions, including towards the east coast of the United States. Today, 40% of the United States population lives in a county that directly borders the shoreline. And the population density right along the east coast is particularly dense. Florida would probably be the first state to get hit by the waves. and it would be particularly vulnerable because most of the state is barely above sea level. Half the area that surrounds Miami is less than 5 feet above sea level. Its highest natural elevation, a limestone ridge that runs from Palm Beach to just south of the city, averages a scant 12 feet. With just 3 feet of sea level rise, more than a third of southern Florida will vanish. At 6 feet, more than half will be gone. If the sea rises 12 feet, South Florida will be a little more than an isolated archipelago surrounded by abandoned buildings and crumbling overpasses. And the waters won't just come in from the east because the region is so flat. Rising seas will come in near as fast from the west too through the Everglades. In other words, there'd be absolutely nothing to keep the tsunami waves from racing across the entire state. That's only at 12 feet. They're talking about 400 feet waves. Much of the rest of the East Coast would be extremely vulnerable as well. New York City is less than 50 feet above sea level. Has a very low elevation, 33 feet above sea level on average, and its elevation is so low due to its location right on the coastline of the United States. Boston, New Haven, New Jersey, Jersey City, Newark, Atlantic City, Philadelphia, Virginia Beach, Wilmington, Delaware, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Savannah, countless other East Coast cities are also less than 50 feet above sea level. So we're talking about the potential for death and destruction on a scale that is unimaginable. So the book of Revelation describes that. That's what we talked about last week. NASA is currently tracking roughly 25,000 near-Earth objects, and new discoveries are being added at a rate of about 30 every week. However, there is one asteroid in particular that Bible prophecy expert Tom Horn believes we should be watching. That asteroid has an appointment with our solar system in the near future, and it's called Apophis, wormwood, named after the ancient Egyptian god of chaos. Where did you hear that before? All right, that's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask us to stand for a moment. And as we stand and we get ready to sing, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. Number one, here's what we're going to do. If you haven't seen it so far, we have this chart that is out in the foyer, and it's for a donation. Everybody's been asking for this chart. After we get it here, that's going to go on the internet. They'll fly off our desks to be able to go on the internet. Everybody wants them. And then we've printed out some that are printable, and they'll be coming, some that are frameable, and they'll be coming very soon. They're harder paper, and you can actually frame them. And so they'll be coming soon. All these proceeds are going to Israel. And I'm very excited about that because Israel has absolutely zero income coming in now from anybody going through any of the tours. So let's just pray for this offering. Father, again, we thank you, and we pray that you would bless this offering, Lord God. Bless our worship again, Lord. And I just pray you bless everyone that's here, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. You can make your way to those baskets that are inside those plates for your offering. Thank you.